afternoon. It's Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. The Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee will come to order. We do have a quorum, and we will begin with Senate Resolution 15. Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, members, I would like to start my presentation with a video.
Insurrection on January 6th was a violent attack that involved vicious assault on law enforcement. We know that men and women who stormed the Capitol wanted to derail the peaceful transfer of power in this country. We know that 7 people lost their lives, that more than 140 police officers suffered injuries. We also know that the rioters came dangerously close to succeeding.
Priority. We just had protests. Peace circle. Breach the line. We need backup.
Hold the line! Hold the line! 42. We're about 5 miles out. We're trying to make our way through all this.
The truck. We're still taking metal, sharpened objects, missiles to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks. This is now effectively a riot.
1349 hours declaring it a riot.
We're trying to hold the upper deck. We are trying to hold the upper deck now. We need to hold the doors of the Capitol. I need court support. We lost the line. We lost the line. All MPDs get back. All MPDs get back up to the upper deck. All MPDs get back to the upper deck.
Okay, guys, apparently this tip of the spear has entered the Capitol building.
Breach of the Capitol to the upper level. If I give this up, they're going to have to run after. At least this Capitol we can defend. We got to hold what we have.
shields. Lock them together. Lock them together. Come on. Jimmy, get him to the back. Get him to the back. Get him to the back. Let's get some fresh faces up front.
Multiple capital injuries. Multiple capital injuries.
People. These were great people. The crowd was unbelievable. And I mentioned the word love, the love in the air. I've never seen anything like it.
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, this was not a love fest. This was a reminder of how close our democracy came to falling. As the internal communication was broadcast on this recording, internal communication from the rioters, the tip of the spear has entered the Capitol. This was organized well ahead of time. The rioters brought tear gas, they brought hockey sticks, they brought batons. This was well planned. 140 law enforcement officers were injured. $1,500 people were convicted. Some given sentences of 18 to 20, 22 and a half years for treason, for insurrection, for violently assaulting and injuring law enforcement officers. 1,500 people came there to the Capitol planning to enter the Capitol and block the peaceful transfer of power in our democracy. And they were pardoned for their crimes by President Trump. There is nothing more dangerous than the abuse of power. And that was the ultimate abuse of power. Dangerous, not only because it disrespected our law enforcement officers, dangerous, not only because this direct attack on democracy was almost successful, but dangerous because the president's message in pardoning those violent criminals was that it was okay to do what you did. Greenlighting future such attacks as well. The resolution that you have before you, very simply, is a reminder of what happened 2 years ago. 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 2 years details some of what happened. You saw in the video that officers were crushed and pinned in doorways. They were dragged, they were beaten. Some of the convictions were for carrying loaded firearms within yards of members of Congress, their staff, and the Vice President of the United States. Some of the most vicious extremist groups, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, who had planned well in advance to organize this attack, were granted pardons by the President of the United States, who inexplicably said they were beautiful people and it was a lot of love out there. Members, I didn't see a lot of love in that video. All I'm asking for you today is to demonstrate your support for law enforcement. To demonstrate your support for democracy. When a pardon is used to undermine or violate core constitutional principles, they undermine the Constitution. They give a green light for future law breaking on this president's behalf. This president rewarded violent criminal attacks on our Capitol and on law enforcement. I'm asking you today to say we will not accept that. Whatever you think about the appropriate outcome of that election, a violent attack on the Capitol was not the answer. And the president pardoning those who did it undermined our democracy. I ask for your support for this resolution. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Latz. It is hard to watch that video and see all the footage. I know that the Senate resolution does speak to the injuries to law enforcement officers, but I also would highlight, of course, the death of one officer and then this leading to the suicides of 4. The trauma is really ongoing from this horrific day, and it really does feel like an absolute slap in the face for the president to pardon the folks who did this. Is there any discussion in the committee? Senator Westlin.
First off, I would ask for a roll call on this. Senator Latz, I do want to thank you for bringing this forward. I think that what occurred on January 6th is unquestionably was a moral insult on our nation. It was, watching that makes my blood pressure rise. It makes my heart beat. I wasn't there. I wasn't the one subject to an attack, and yet watching that over and over again has such a deep, profound effect on me, and I'm sure others who watch that. It is unconscionable that this took place, in our country, at our Capitol, the seat of democracy in our nation. And it is a deep moral insult that this president would pardon people who committed grievous acts of violence, who arrived at the Capitol on that day in order to commit acts of violence, in order to interfere with the peaceful transition of power. I am disgusted. Every time I see that, I am disgusted. But I am even more disgusted that the person sitting in the Oval Office at this time thinks it is appropriate to just provide a blanket pardon to folks, some of whom I think have been rearrested for other things. These are not nice people. These are not people who are patriots. These are not people who showed up with love in their heart. These were people who were there to commit mayhem and to try to prevent the transition of power, which has occurred since the beginning of our nation. And so I thank you so much for bringing this forward, and this should be the easiest vote that any of us should have to take. And I appreciate the fact that you have mentioned that we all may have different feelings about that election. That's okay. But we should be unified and united and anonymous in our condemnation of what took place that day and the absolute condemnation of pardoning criminals, insurrectionists, traitors, seditionists. This should be the easiest vote that anyone can take. So I want to thank you, Senator Latz, for bringing this forward, and I hope every person on this committee votes yes.
Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Latz. I was looking over this resolution, and after seeing that film, I too would condemn riotous acts, but I'm kind of curious why we have a resolution at this time. This happened, the riot itself happened, 4 years ago, maybe longer. The pardon happened a couple months ago. Personally, I haven't gotten a single call from anyone in my district regarding the pardon by President Trump on anyone. And with all the other issues that we have facing us today, I find this to be somewhat of a distraction. It borders on one of those gotcha issues that we see every once in a while in the legislature. Couple that with recent comments from Governor Walz, calling members of my party fascists and Nazis, especially when you and I have a history of sharing important issues, especially involving our partnership on supporting a very important trading partner internationally. And quite honestly, I find the governor's comments to be as insulting as the hurtful scenes I saw today on the film. And I'm just raising the question, we just seem to be living in a world that is losing our civility on so many different fronts, and it's on both sides. I can't help but look at this, and with understanding the timeline of our legislative session, we're now into nearing the middle of February, or March, I'm sorry. And we're running out of time. We still have some serious budgets to take care of. We have a deficit that's looming, that's gigantic. I think you and I have both gone through those deficit years where we've tried to solve those problems. It's very hurtful in order to cure those problems, especially if you don't raise taxes. And I find that this particular resolution is, well, hardly timely, number one. And number two, I find it to be a great distraction. And as I said before, it borders on a gotcha vote. I know that leadership of both caucuses have had discussions about this. And there doesn't seem to be an answer from one of your co-authors, Senator Murphy, regarding any desire to be cautious about the relationship between our two caucuses. We started out pretty good. As you may remember, at that time we had a tied vote and we were sharing leadership, at least sharing participation in committees. And I thought we were getting off to a pretty good start, and it continued all the way up to today. But I look at this particular resolution, and it's more on process than anything else. I find it a distraction, and when it comes time for me to vote, I will be passing on this particular vote. I'm not going to play in the same sandbox as where you want me to go. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Senator Latz.
Senator Limmer, you and I have had a very good working relationship, but we have had substantial disagreements over the years. And while I value that relationship, it's not at stake here, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not here because of any comments that the governor has made. They're inapposite to the resolution that we have before us today, which focuses specifically on the January 6th riots, and more to the point today, on President Trump's pardon of the 400 convicted violent criminals and 1,100 other convicted criminals who partook in that riot. And that was less than 2 months ago. So this resolution is very timely in that regard. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's never too late to condemn an insurrection against our democracy. And it's certainly not too late to condemn pardoning the insurrectionists. The incivility that you referred to as perhaps being on both sides, there weren't two sides on January 6th. That was all one side. On behalf of the loser in that election, who has now regained power and pardoned those who were the violent attackers, on behalf of the then loser of that election, trying to stop the certification of the winner in that election. There were no both sides, and there was no incivility on the part of the winning side in that election, President Biden. So there's no basis for equating one side with the other from January 6th or the pardon itself. And with all due respect, I would view passing on this vote as an abdication of our obligations as elected officials and defenders of the oaths that we have taken to defend the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota. I think it's incumbent upon us as elected officials to defend those constitutions. This violent insurrection was a direct attack on those constitutions. And I would think, as Senator Westlin indicated, whatever our views on policy, whatever our views on who won the election in 2020, I would think that we could unite in condemnation of the violent attack on the peaceful transfer of power, and that we could unite saying that those who were convicted criminals, either by juries or by their own pleas of guilty, their admissions of committing those violent crimes against law enforcement officers, I think we ought to be able to unite in concluding that pardoning those criminals is also not the values that we support. So I would hope that we could all make a unified statement here together on this matter.
Madam Chair.
Senator Limmer.
I'm sure, Senator Latz, you can interpret my passing vote any way you want. I just don't think, from a process perspective, that this is an appropriate one in light of the serious issues we have today. Trying to make comment on what a president's logic was on pardoning individuals, none of us are privy to the reasoning he had. We're just simply reacting basically to a headline. And quite honestly, I would think we would need a little bit more than that. There's certainly other issues that were raised outside of what we saw in that film. The request for troops 2 days before the event occurred from President Trump. The request from President Trump at a speech earlier that morning saying, be respectful. Comments that were not showing his support of violence or anything else. But focusing on the pardon itself, we just don't have all the facts in front of us of what he was considering. I don't. There are also stories of little old ladies that were put in prison for months and months awaiting a trial and not necessarily getting one either. So I think there's enough reason to go around that, and enough information that we don't have the facts on a lot of it. So I think if anything, this bill might be premature. But as far as labeling my intentions with a vote to pass would be inaccurate for you to consider I'm in league with what happened in Washington on January 6th.
And Madam Chair, just to that last point.
Senator Latz.
I am not suggesting that any senator is in league with what happened. I'm just suggesting we ought to be able to unify to condemn it and to condemn the president's action. What we do know is that the president didn't issue individual pardons name by name, although I'm sure there's the list of names formally. It was a blanket pardon all at one time, 1,500 people. So I don't need to know what individual thought process the president went through. Most pardons, when they happen after someone has been sentenced, convicted, and served many years of a prison term, or have already served and been released and are just looking to clear their records. That didn't happen here. These convicts were only, at most, within a couple of years of beginning the sentence. So this wasn't about that. It was about the only message that we can take is it was about giving comfort and succor to those who attacked the Capitol. Whatever happened before that day, whatever happened on that day, in terms of what the president had to say, I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on the conduct that we saw in the video, the criminal justice process that resulted in convictions by plea or trial, and the president's actions to clear those individuals, which is what a pardon does.
There's a few more members who want to speak, and I'll make sure I come back to you if you have any closing comments, Senator Latz.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Western.
Madam Chair, Senator Westlin and Senator Westrom sound so close that I often turn my head when you call her name as well, or Chair Latz. So, Mr. Chair, wonder if Senator Latz could yield for, or would, Senator Latz, this resolution seems to be very targeted to one party, but are you overlooking pardons that were made this fall to President Biden's family members? Is that not grieve you and concern you about the Constitution, which was a remark you just made?
Senator Latz.
Mr. President, Madam Chair and Senator Westrom, usually when I slip, I say Your Honor. Senator Westrom, I'm not making any comment with regard to those pardons, although I will distinguish them simply by saying they were not violent crimes against law enforcement, and they were not an attempt to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power in our democracy. They're just completely different kinds of crimes that were alleged to have been committed or have been committed.
Senator Westrom.
Madam Chair and Senator Latz, you had just referenced that one of the reasons for this was because of the concern for the Constitution, and certainly the allegations against Hunter Biden and what kind of treasonous acts he may have been a part of, that, of course, one can only surmise that that's part of the reason for the pardon, certainly was jeopardy and threatened to our Constitution. So I find it peculiar, but this isn't a question. I'll just, your first answer, I guess, led me to what I was thinking I would find out, is one side is going to be justified and another is not. Maybe the bigger question is, Senator Latz, with what seems to be a growing committee agenda, that we have this much time to spend on such a partisan matter that we would have to spend probably hours and hours to really get the whole story or both sides of this. And is that what you're proposing we would do, Senator Latz? Do you have time on the agenda that we would bring in all the different parties, because there are multiple stories and perspectives and thoughts on details that happened? I don't know if you've talked to people that were there that day. I have, and I get a variety of stories from those that might have been in Washington that day for various reasons. And so are we going to open up? Do we have quite a few testifiers here to talk about all the different sides of this issue today or in the near future?
Senator Latz.
Madam President, we have before us simply a resolution that condemns the pardon of those who were convicted of crimes. So for those who were there in Washington acting peacefully, I have no quarrel with that. And it's not our intent nor our jurisdiction to litigate or evaluate exactly what happened on January 6th. There were plenty of congressional investigations on that as well. All we're trying to do here is condemn the pardoning of those who were convicted of crimes arising out of that riot.
So, Mr. Chair.
Senator Westrom.
Senator Latz, what is your intention if this resolution would pass out of committee? What's the path for it? Assume go to the floor? Do you intend to bring it up soon, or what's kind of your hope as the author?
Senator Westrom, I'll first just say that we will be taking a vote to refer this to the Committee on Rules and Administration, but I'll let Senator Latz speak to that as well.
Okay. So,
Madam Chair, that's the process within our Senate rules, and that's my intent.
Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, Senator Latz, looking at line 2.13 and 2.14, looks to me like that language is trying to say that the Senate would ignore the federal judiciary decisions or of the pardon. Is that what is that a correct assessment of what that language is trying to say, that we would ignore actions at the federal level? Is that a correct recap of Senate lines 213 and 214, or can you tell me what those lines are in there for?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Westrom, those lines indicate that we should follow and respect decisions made by judges in the state and federal government, in particular, as it is relating to these kind of the conduct that is involved here in the violent attack on the U.S. Capitol. And that, in fact, the pardon ignored and overruled decisions, and certainly the effective decisions by state and federal judges, especially federal judges in these cases.
So Mr. Chair.
Senator Westrom.
Senator Latz, would you say that same language then would apply to Biden's pardons as well?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, I'm not aware, well, President Biden issued quite a few pardons, so I don't know. Well, there is a constitutional pardon power that exists. If you're referring to what you referred to earlier regarding President Biden's son, some of that, there had not even been any judicial decisions yet. So this is not a quarrel with the existence of the pardon power under the U.S. Constitution. This is a quarrel with its exercise by President Trump as it relates to those who are convicted of crimes arising out of the January 6th insurrection.
And
Senator Westrom.
And Madam Chair and Senator Latz, so as I read that language, it says we should ignore what we don't think is correct. And so if you extrapolate that to President Biden and his own son and the pardon he granted, which had many people up in arms, including Democrats, I could only surmise that you're saying the same treatment should happen, and the pardon we should be, as a Senate, supporting this, we should ignore that action and still investigate President Biden's son because of the conduct that was alleged in the evidence that have come forward that obviously he was protecting him from. It seems like you'd have to be treating everybody fair. Is that your intent?
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, if Hunter Biden had been convicted of violently attacking the Capitol, democracy, interfering with the peaceful transfer of power in the United States, I would have the same problem if he were later pardoned for those convictions. That's not what we have before us today. There's absolutely zero comparison that can be made validly, in my judgment.
So,
Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, Senator Latz, would you have the same outrage if Hunter Biden sold or gave access to United States secrets or other things that purportedly might have been treasonous and damaged our country? Would you have the same type of indignation against that?
Again, we'll reiterate Senator Latz's point that I think what we have before us is a resolution to condemn those who were found guilty of these crimes. But Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, now we're dealing in hypotheticals with investigations, no convictions, no pleas of guilty that were involved. There have been plenty of investigations on the other matter. An attempt to equate them or to muddy the waters in the message or dilute the message of this resolution is just that. It's trying to divert attention. What this resolution condemns is the pardon of those who were convicted by their own pleas or by a jury of their peers for violently attacking law enforcement officers at the Capitol and trying to undermine the peaceful transfer of power following an election. It is no broader than that. And that's what the vote here today will reflect.
So Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Westrom.
And Senator Latz, just to cover that issue, the language on line 213 and 214, Madam Chair, is telling us if you support it, you support the effort of ignoring the federal decisions that were made. And the same seems like it would have to be true to other pardons issued by President Biden or other pardons that have been made, and establish that the Senate wants to make its own decision to when something is proper to enforce or not. And so I raise that as a concern. Senator Latz, we have a lot of bills to cover. I'm amazed that this is taking up this much committee time when there's budgets and other things to deal with. You're talking about Friday hearings now, and yet we've got enough time on the calendar to work on a political charade like this that needs a lot more testifiers and discussion if we're going to actually get to the root of it and treat everybody fair, including what some of the consequences might have been of President Biden's pardons, which I note is mysteriously absent from this resolution, just showing the partisan divisiveness of this resolution. And Senator Latz, it seems like maybe this is a good distraction to not keep the public focused on the $18 billion deficit that was burned through by the Democrats. Now the Democrats' deficit that we're facing after a $10 billion tax increase on top of blowing the deficit. I can see why you want to bring some of this to distract from those topics that the Democrats don't have to talk about, because it was a disaster in spending that kind of money and now facing a Democrat deficit. So I understand where you're trying to go with this, but I now understand it more clearer after the questions. Thank you.
There's a number of members who wanted to make some additional comments, so I will go to Senator Clark and then Senator Westlin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this resolution. I will take the admonition of my colleagues and be brief. Police Chief Brian O'Hara, Police Chief of Minneapolis, where we are working to rebuild rebuild the police force in terms of the numbers, shared this. I ask Minnesotans to reflect on these decisions mean for us as a society, the pardons he's talking about, particularly as we're trying to rebuild the ranks of law enforcement in our state. For those of us in the profession, this is another reminder that we cannot play politics with public safety. For the families of officers who made the ultimate sacrifice, the pardons are a very harsh slap in the face. I ask that we be brief and vote yes.
Senator Westlin? We'll move to Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm probably the closest thing to a Republican on the DFL side of this table, but there are lines that I will not cross. And when I was a young lawyer, one of the best pieces of advice I received was to concede points that needed to be conceded. And it's puzzling to me that the GOP side of this table is refusing to do that. Chair Latz, thank you for bringing this resolution and inviting me to sign on as a co-author. I think not only is it appropriate that we have this discussion, but it's our duty to point out treason when we see it, and that's what we're doing, and I thank you for that. I've heard objections to spending time on this important issue because of a packed committee agenda, a lack of time. Senator Limmer, you spoke about our ability to work together during the power sharing. Yet I recall, Senator Limmer, when you had the gavel, you used your time to put the spotlight on a right-wing organization who presented a blatantly racist agenda to this committee. So I find it disingenuous to criticize this resolution that I think is very appropriately before this committee. I fought to keep power sharing in the Senate, but quite frankly, after I saw how our time would be used with the GOP holding the gavel in this committee, I rethought that decision. We didn't hear bills. We didn't advance policy. And I was persuaded once our good Senator Clark was seated and we got back to the 34, I was persuaded to vote to return that gavel to Senator Latz. So I want to thank Senator Latz for having the courage to bring this resolution. I will be a yes, and I'm proud to be a co-author.
Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Latz, for bringing this up. This is timely. It has not been very long since these pardons were issued. It has not been very long since the criticism of these pardons were a reaction. And I think this actually has some bipartisan support. We've had the Fraternal Order of Police. That was a large group that endorsed the present occupant of the White House that came out strongly opposing these pardons. And as Senator Clark mentioned, the police chief of Minneapolis strongly opposed these pardons. But what I think when you look at the reason for your resolution here is, I think, very important, and that is that we need to demonstrate that there are people who do not appreciate a president who would overrule all of the convictions that were made. There were juries called, there were charges filed, and in fact, roughly 1,000 out of the 2,500 people that were arrested actually pled guilty to their charges, and when they did, they were sentenced either to outside of incarceration or in incarceration. And as you mentioned, one of the people that was charged and convicted had a 22-year sentence, and that person was pardoned along with the people that just walked onto the property of the Capitol. So I think there's a major difference here within each person who has been convicted and has now been freed without any record of their conviction. And I think that that's something that we needed to make sure that we put a stake in the ground. And we said that we don't want to give permission to insurrectionists and demonstrate to them that they have nothing to worry about if they do further insurrection, because they have a friend in the White House that's already demonstrated that he will be on their side. This needs to be stopped. It needs to be recognized. And I think what we had was, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that January 6th was totally provoked by Trump and others in power. And we need to make sure that that kind of lawlessness is put in publicity and stopped. So I thank you for bringing this this resolution, and I hope we bring it as high and as far as we can. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak.
I will just say thank you for bringing forward the resolution, Senator Latz. I'm also proud to co-author, and I'll be voting yes. Any final comments, and then we'll go to a vote.
Madam Chair, we are 51 days since President Trump pardoned those who attacked the Capitol and those who attacked our law enforcement officers defending the Capitol and defending democracy. It's a good time to say we will not accept that. We will not accept those who think that was okay or think those convictions ought to be erased, and that convicted insurrectionists and violent criminals should be set free. Madam Chair, I move that Senate Resolution number 15 be recommended to pass, that it be re-referred to the Senate Committee on Rules and Administration, that there be a roll call vote, and that the votes be recorded in the journal.
Thank you, Senator Latz. We just need 3 hands for printing in the journal. Okay, seeing 3. Senator Latz has moved that Senate Resolution 15 be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Latz?
Yes.
Senator Oumou Verbeten?
Yes.
Senator Limmer?
Pass.
Senator Anderson?
Pass.
Senator Carlson?
Yes.
Senator Clark? Yes. Senator Howe? Senator Kroon? Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Senator Seeberger?
Yes.
Senator Westlin?
Yes.
Senator Westrom? No. Senator Howe? Absent. Senator Kroon? Absent.
All right, there being 7 in favor, 1 against, and 2 abstentions, Senate Resolution 15 will move to the Committee on Rules and Administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, we will take Senate File 543, Senator Westlin.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are the next three bills, are they going to be laid over?
Senator Anderson, the bill that's before us coming now, Senate File 543, was heard before, laid on the table, but the witnesses were not able to make it here to testify. So we're giving an opportunity to hear from them, and then we'll lay that on the table again. Senate File 209, it's anticipated will be passed on to the Committee on Taxes. And Senate File 204, it's anticipated to be referred to the Senate floor.
Thank
They'll
you.
be taking votes on
So
209 and 204.
Thank you.
Senate File 543, Senator Westlin, could you give us a brief recap of what this does? Members, you have information in your packet, and then we'll hear from your testifiers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. Senate File 543, you will recall, we heard last week, I believe. And unfortunately, one of my testifiers was ill and not able to be here, and both of them are here today. Senate File 543 raises the amount designated for the statewide Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership by $30 from dissolution filing fees and $30 from each marriage license filing fee without the premarital education piece. These amounts will I'm sorry, this is about a different bill. These amounts will not increase the overall filing fee paid by applicants. This would be the program's first and only inflationary adjustment in over 20 years. For 45-plus years, the Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership, federally known as the Displaced Homemaker Program, has been a trusted pre-employment and family stabilization program provided by a network of 6 regional partners across the state. It is the only program in the state specifically designed to help displaced homemakers address the unique barriers they face while trying to re-enter or enter the workforce. Again, as the members will recall, we did discuss this bill last week. There are a couple of other bills that may intersect with this. We are trying to coordinate a couple of other bills, including Senator Oumou Verbeten's Crime Victim Services Bill, to try to secure additional funding not only for Crime Victim Services, but also for the Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership. I'm going to stop talking, Mr. Chair, and allow my testifiers to provide some additional information about this really important bill.
Thank you, Senator Westlin. Who would like to go first among the testifiers?
My name is Jean Keenan.
Ms. Keenan, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you for this opportunity. The goal of the statewide Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership, or MFRP, is to help participants achieve lasting self-sufficiency by interrupting the downward spiral often faced by participants after the loss of a family's primary wage earner due to death, disability, divorce, or abandonment. This program has been helping people to change lives for nearly half a century and has long-time stable leadership with directors having 20-plus years of experience. Services are offered at no cost to participants, all of whom are at or below 200% of the federal poverty guideline. The 6 regional providers across the state offer effective, holistic, and client-driven services. 73% of program participants are survivors of domestic violence. 28% enter the program unhoused. 71% have dependents counting on them. Of the participants with a child support order in place, 75% are not receiving that support as ordered by the court. Each individual works with a provider to develop a unique action plan, essential transferable skills, and effective job search strategies. The program provides direct support dollars to help participants overcome barriers. Most importantly, the program builds stable relationships through trauma-informed care to help participants overcome their barriers. Participants are eligible for 12 months and sometimes longer. We recognize that other bills have been introduced this session to use this same fee structure that was created specifically to ensure that our life-changing services would be available. We do not wish to be pitted against other programs. Our guiding principle for nearly 5 decades has been that once survivors of domestic violence move towards economic self-sufficiency, they will at last have a real option to not return to unsafe relationships out of economic need. As you can see, funding for these services is authorized by statute and administered through deed from a portion of the marriage license and divorce filing fees. The amount collected from these fees was the program's sole funding source from 1982 to 1992. In 2003, it was recommended we return to the use of these fees as our funding source once again. This continues to the present. The amount allocated to MFRP has not been adjusted in the last 22 years. During a recent budget year, there were no other bills requesting funding in this way, and thanks to this committee, the funding MFRP requested was included in an omnibus bill, which unfortunately wasn't passed that year. The most recent calculation shows that the state realized a $20.89, the most recent calculation shows that the state realized a $26.89 to $1 return on its investment in the program by helping move people away from public assistance. Those who exited the program as employed did so at an average wage of $20.38 per hour. 97% of program participants successfully complete the program, meaning they have reached the goals they set at intake, which include becoming employed and/or continuing their education. This unique program has always addressed both safety and self-sufficiency, and therefore required a unique funding approach. The individuals who need our services are often Minnesota's unseen unemployed or underemployed who may not otherwise receive any services and would be ineligible for unemployment benefits. We have been good stewards of the funding we have received over the years, and we are asking for your support of Senate File 543.
Thank you, Ms. Keenan. Ms. Pilgrim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Kimberly Pilgrim, and at the request of Betty Rail, I'm here to share her story. Betty cannot be here with us today because she was unable to take time off from work. Quote, I was a homemaker for 30 years and raised 3 children. One afternoon, my husband left for an appointment and never returned. I was left isolated, grief-stricken, suicidal, and fearful. I did not have an income and had little experience with driving a vehicle. I didn't even know how to put gas in my car. I had no community support, and my grown children were living out of state. Someone told me about the Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership, so I made an appointment. I was very afraid, but I drove to the office that was at Central Lakes College. I was too afraid to go in, and the director met me in the parking lot. I attended workshops that helped me manage grief, learn self-esteem, manage loss, life skills, and self-confidence. I also had the help of other participants who taught me how to put gas in my car and treated me as family. The program supported me with car repairs, gas, clothing, food, and resources for food. At first, much of my time was on one-on-one preparation, and as I was gaining strength, at 53 years old, I knew I had to do something. With individual career planning, I decided to enroll in college in the administrative assistant program. While in college, I did work study with the local Family Resiliency Program and was given hands-on office skill training. I graduated from college with honors, and because I had gained such strength, I was fully prepared for employment. After 3 months of graduation, I was interviewed and hired full-time, and I am now earning a livable wage with great benefits. I would have not made it without this program. I urge you to recognize its profound impact and continue funding and supporting this vital initiative. The people who benefit from this program are not just statistics. We are survivors, and we are proof that with the right resources, a second chance at life is possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Pilgrim. Senator Westlin, did you have any other testifiers today?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any other persons in the room wish to testify in connection with this? Any questions or comments from members of the committee for either of our testifiers or Senator Westlin? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Senator Mr. Chairman. Senator Westlin, I want to thank you for bringing this forward. I've followed this particular program over recent years. It's true, the people who run this operation are very diligent. They're very careful with the money that we give them. And I do believe that there's a very good purpose that they satisfy with the use of the issuance of our funds. I just wanted to make sure everyone realized that. Thank you, Senator Westlin.
Mr. Chair and Senator Limmer, and again, Senator Limmer, I know you have been a champion from the beginning for this program, and I want to thank you for that, and also for being a co-author on the bill, both 2023 and this year. So we are hoping, Mr. Chair and members, that this is the year we are going to do something for the Family Resiliency Partnership. Unfortunately, there were some arrangements that were made in 2023 that just did not come to fruition, and this program cannot survive if we do not do something. And so I hope that we will work, again, collaboratively with Senator Oumou Verbeten. Senator Mann has a bill, and I do believe that we can come up with some ways to get some additional funding to this really important partner in communities throughout Minnesota.
Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Westlin, for bringing forward the bill. Just want to say I absolutely support this work. Thank you for bringing it forward. It's funding very crucial work, and as I'm working on a number of potential avenues for crime victim services, like I said, don't want to pit any programs against each other. So anything I can do to lend support, let me know. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Not seeing any. Senate File 543 is laid on the table.
Thanks.
Senate File 209, Senator Oumou Verbeten. Members, in your packet, or having been handed out, is a letter of support, and there's a summary from the Tax Committee. Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File 209 repeals the illegal cannabis and controlled substance tax, or Chapter 297D, and it also removes the criminal penalties for the failure to pay this tax that are referenced in Chapter 209. It's currently a felony. The current illegal cannabis and controlled substance tax requires individuals to pay taxes on illegal cannabis and controlled substances. To comply with this law, individuals need to purchase stamps for illegal drugs from the Department of Revenue, ranging from $350 to $400 per unit. This tax was implemented in 1986 during the height of the war on drugs. Prosecutors could have used it as an enforcement tool, really charging folks with possession and the failure to pay taxes on those drugs. That's no longer the practice of most prosecutors in the state. I have been in touch with the Minnesota County Attorneys Association on the bill. They have not taken an official position. I also want to note that the Department of Revenue hasn't received revenue from this tax in years. There was nothing collected in 2024, 2023, or 2022. The effort to repeal this entire controlled substance tax chapter is bipartisan. It's been included in previous House File 4667 from the 2022 legislative session with all GOP authors. And then last year, we did hear this bill in committee with bipartisan support. It just didn't make it through the end of session, but there was support in both bodies and in the tax conference committee. So hoping we can get it done this year. Thank you.
Anyone in the room wish to testify in connection with this bill? Not seeing anyone. Any members of the committee have any questions or comments? Not seeing any. Senator Oumou Verbeten, your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the Taxes Committee wants this back. So I will move that Senate File 209 be recommended to pass and sent to the Senate Taxes Committee.
Senator Oumou Verbeten moves that Senate File 209 be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Senate Committee on Taxes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Senate File 204 is Senator Port's bill. Senator Port is not available. Senator Oumou Verbeten will be presenting the bill. Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will talk about just this bill that has some technical changes for the Cannabis Expungement Board. There's also some testifiers here today who can help. I do have, believe this was the first, is this the first stop for the bill? Okay, so there is an author's amendment, and then there was one additional change to that A5 amendment. I can either move that now or go into the explanation of the bill.
Senator, why don't you incorporate the A6 into the A5? And we'll pass out the A6 so members have it. We can take the testimony and then we'll deal with it as one author's amendment.
Great.
Who wishes to go first in terms of testimony?
I will just give you a sort of a brief explanation and then I'll move to the testifiers. Just want to share that the Cannabis Expungement Board was created by legislation in 2023, along with the cannabis legislation, to review past felony level cannabis convictions for possible expungement or resentencing. And the BCA has identified 98,000 cases for the board to review. Eligibility for expungement includes the absence of weapons or violence involvement, and that act must be less than felony level under current law. The board must also conduct a multi-part analysis that includes public safety considerations. After getting the office established, the board has recently begun reviewing cases. However, oversights in this legislation and a decision by the courts resulted in the board not being able to review many cases that the legislature did intend. And so this legislation is really just trying to resolve those issues. And then with that author's amendment, it will do the following: capture some cannabis offenses that were unintentionally missed in the drafting of the original legislation, address the issue of the courts not sealing records in multi-count cases, and include historic cannabis offenses that might not be included in the statute.
All right, Senator Oumou Verbeten moves the A5 amendment, incorporating the language in the A6 amendment as well as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Mr. Hasse, you going to go first?
Actually, Mr. Chair, Mr. Rauter will go first.
Well, I can just introduce myself, Chair.
Please
Jim
do.
Rauter, I'm the Executive Director of the Cannabis Expungement Board. Senator here did a great overview of our agency. I don't think I need to take up any more of your time on that. I've been in the role since April of last year. We have a leadership team in place. We're in the middle of hiring our staff attorneys and staff paralegals, and we are now underway and actually reviewing cases for eligibility for expungement under the statute. Mr. Hasse will, I think, expand on some points related to the amendments. He is the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Cannabis Expungement Board.
Thank you, Mr. Rauter. Mr. Hasse.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mark Hazy with the Cannabis Expungement Board. Senator Oumou Verbeten did a nice job of summarizing this, but just as a quick refresher for members on the statute for us, we have jurisdiction over felony cannabis convictions that did not involve dangerous weapons or violent acts or threats, and for which the act currently would not be a felony. The board has to go through a public safety and other analysis of each case, and then determine whether charges should be vacated and dismissed, if somebody should have their gun rights restored, if education licensure records should be sealed, or if the case could be eligible for resentencing. The analysis that has to be done, I've got a list here on the PowerPoint, things such as the nature and severity of the crime, types of risk, danger of release from sentence, aggravating factors, statements from victims or law enforcement. And, you may be wondering, as an organization, how we're going to get through 98,000 of these records, before the end of this century. Turns out a lot of those records will not be cannabis. What we're finding is a little over half maybe are cannabis, because the way that fifth-degree possession is charged, it often includes other types of drugs, so those don't fall under our jurisdiction. And we have just developed a process with the board where we're starting out. We're calling it phase one, where we look at the lowest types of offenses, fifth-degree possession, that under current law would be a misdemeanor or less. The staff does some quality control measures, making sure there's no violence or weapons in those cases. And just today, we had our March board meeting, and the board reviewed and approved 48 cases for expungement, denied one case. And we anticipate being able to do about 100 cases per month with our current staff for the next 6 months or so. Once the rest of our staff are in place and we've got the process all set up, we're hoping to do many more cases per month, hundreds of cases. The senator also covered the changes we're looking for here. Really, this is an attempt to get the current statute into a shape that we think was intended initially. There were some oversights. A couple of the changes just ensure that all types of cannabis offenses are included. The eligibility remains the same. So if it was, the act was what would currently be a felony or greater, would not be eligible, and those other factors have to be there as well. And then the courts have made a determination that for when there's an eligible cannabis case that that's been expunged, or they're being requested through statute to expunge, if there's multiple counts, they're not going to seal those other counts, even if they were all dismissed. I've got some notes here on the PowerPoint. They issued an administrative order last year to this effect, and that's because in the record, if there's other counts, there's records of that would not be eligible, so they can't seal those separately in their electronic database. And so what the language in this bill does is, and we've worked with court administration to get language that they said works for them administratively, is if the other counts were dismissed or the other counts are eligible under the automatic cannabis expungement statute for misdemeanors, then we would be able to seal that entire record. So if one of those counts became a conviction of some other crime that we don't have jurisdiction over, that we would not be able to seal that separate cannabis count. But if all the other counts were dismissed or are otherwise eligible under the automatic cannabis expungement, then we could direct the courts to seal the entire record. That's it. We can stay for questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hazy. Anyone else in the room wish to testify in connection with this bill? Not seeing anyone. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hazy, I was a little slow on the draw there as you were talking. If there is another criminal charge, are you saying that, let's say a gun was found in the commission of a cannabis misdemeanor. Would the expungement cover the gun charge?
Mr. Haase.
Mr. Chair, Senator Limmer, just a little bit of clarification. If it's a misdemeanor, we don't have, if the final conviction was misdemeanor cannabis, the board doesn't have jurisdiction over that. Generally, that's automatic expungement. But the courts have said now that if there are any other cases dismissed with that, they're not going to seal that record at all. What this legislation would do is just for the felonies that are under the jurisdiction of the Cannabis Expungement Board. In that case, we potentially could, as we mentioned, a case that involves, the underlying act involves the use of a weapon or violent act, that's not eligible, okay? Let's say it was something else. Let's say it was an assault, but it was dismissed. This would allow the board to seal that dismissed, which is already, by the way, eligible, will be, if it was by itself, would be eligible under clean slate, that separate type of a dismissal. That if it was dismissed, this would allow us, based on the cannabis conviction, to have the whole record sealed. Now, remember that the board is going to look at these cases, and if there's some aggravating factors there, or something that, for lack of a better expression, doesn't it raises a public safety issue is probably the way to put it. The board could choose not to act on that case. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Limmer.
It partially does. If it was a more serious assault, aggravated assault, let's say, does the board, are they seeking the authority to expunge that record?
Mr. Haase.
Mr. Chair, Senator Limmer, if it was, if there was an eligible felony cannabis conviction and that assault had been dismissed, then this would give the board the authority to seal that record, have that record sealed, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily would based on this other analysis that's required.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Senator Oumou Verbeten, your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Senate File 204 as amended be recommended to pass and be referred to the Senate floor.
Senator Oumou Verbeten moves that Senate File 204 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Senate floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Members, our next meeting is going to be Monday, March 17, 12:30 here in this room. Reminder that today is Shamrock Shake Day in the basement of the Capitol. So don't miss that unless you are lactose intolerant, then you do it at your own risk. Looks like we are adjourning a half an hour early. We have ample time to consider all agenda items today. Members, we are adjourned.